The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show, and I'm so pleased to have Karina Holosko on my show. You know, she's a writer and she does so many different things, and I'm going to let her even tell you what she does, because it is so remarkable that we have a guest like this who has really gotten involved in so many things. So Karina, starting with who you are, what you are, and what inspired you to become what you are is very important for our audience. So why don't you tell us that?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I am so pleased to be here with you, especially in these very difficult times. And I consider myself a writer, a photographer, a sculptor, an animal rights activist, and a sexual abuse survivor.
Let's start with that, the sexual abuse survivor.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to you? Can you tell us a story about yourself and why you were a survivor of these horrible things?
Well, yes, I was sexually abused by an older brother of mine. He was about 14 years older than me for many, many years, groomed. Then we went out into the world, and he went into the world and he became a very, very important professor in all things of social work. And he was doing articles on family dysfunction and sexual abuse. And then ironically, and so I had nothing to say. It was just me, a little sexual abuse victim, you know, barking up the wrong tree at this big, huge professor. And then one day I opened the newspaper and there's an article about my brother having sexually abused and sexually terrorized students for over 10 or 15 years in universities all over.
Oh my goodness. You know, Karina, did your family know about this?
Well, I think my mother's there were some difficulties in the family. It's hard to say. You would have to ask them, and they are dead now, passed away. So I don't think I want to go there, whether they knew or whether they didn't know. It was just an unfortunate situation. But I went from like a victim when I saw the newspaper to a hero. From a victim to I was a liar and a victim up to that point. I read the article, all of a sudden I was no longer a liar, and I was.
Karina, as a writer, did you write anything about that? Because this is a subject that is very important and a situation that happens a lot around the world. And I think it really needs people to understand what it's like to experience something like that.
Yes, I do write about it, but when I've discovered when you're writing about a traumatic event in your own life, you start writing it from this perspective and from that perspective, and your timeline gets all disjointed, because when you're abused, there's no timeline, you know, and you're jumping from the past to the present to the future, and it can become very garbled. And so you have to organize all that out into a linear package that people understand. And then you bring this trauma to other people, and you feel kind of responsible for putting that on their lap into their life.
Yeah.
And so you have to find a way to take that trauma and that pain and then find something inspiring, take something of it that can give the reader some kind of inspiration that the victim got back on the right track, that we can face our adversities no matter how horrible they are, and find some gem in there in which to cultivate and grow.
So, Karina, you've really been through a lot, but you've written books which probably give you the inspiration to tell your story. I'm just wondering, what are the books that really stand out that our audience should know about?
Well, I'd like to focus on, I guess, the most recent books. Let's move forward. I did during COVID 2 very important books. The first one I did was to bring families together. I wanted people to have an activity book in their house in which they could do stuff together. And what better place, what do people love more than anything? Spells and magic and wonderful things. So I said, why don't I make spells with ingredients that people can find in their home? Because I'm an animal rights activist, so I don't want to newt or dog, bark of dog or dog's tail, no animal parts in my spells. So I took things from the kitchen toothpicks, forks, plates. And I made spells. Let me give you an example of one. One is called anti-techie tea. So someone would take a mug, put it in the middle of the room. Everybody would hold hands, move forward 2 steps, move backward 2 steps, maybe jump on 1 foot for 3 times, wink your left eye 4 or 5 times, and say some magic words. And then you could put the cup in a cupboard overnight. And so some of them are quite elaborate. They take a whole weekend to do, but that's just a sample of the activity book. It's called Ancient Spells for a Modern World. And the website is ancientmodern.net. I couldn't get .org because they wanted to charge me $5,000 for the privilege. So I got .net. And you can meet there the Kundalini Dragon. And he is from the Witchlock Society. So kids can sign up to be Witchlocks. And they can get a new spell every week. And then they can buy jewelry and charms. And they can learn about themselves. And you've got Octopus Fart, and he's in charge of public relations. So I created a whole world in that book.
Now, it's very interesting what you're talking about. It sounds like you're an entrepreneur who's really gotten involved in a lot in selling things and doing different things for people. How successful have you been with that?
Well, I've been very successful. I've been a designer for quite some time. So all of my books and everything I do comes with mugs and this and that. There's a settling point. After you get to a certain part of a project, the end has to have a pause. It has to filter itself into the energies of the world around it. It has to attract people naturally and organically. So the first book, The Ancient Spells for a Modern World, is sitting right now in an organic place, being looked at, being examined, and it's going to be one of those things that just goes from 0 to 100. So it's just finished and I have to relax with that. However, the second book I did called COVID Rebels, which is an anthology, is my first anthology. I always wanted to write an anthology, but anthologies are usually regulated to universities, and universities put them on bookshelves, and they're really boring visually.
Well,
Right.
I'm interested in it. Do you have it in front of you?
I do.
Okay, well, that's good. I want you to take a little tidbit of it and read it to
Okay.
our audience, if you will.
Okay, let me see. There were 6 poets in here, 7, excuse me, including myself. And we've got interviews. I'm going to read just a little bit. This is one of my animal rights activist pieces. It's about a little porpoise. It's a vaquita porpoise, and they went extinct on a certain day in 2009, December 5th, 2009, and there were no more. So I wrote this little poem for them. Our planet is a worse place because we failed to protect you, love you, and find enough value in your life spirit to go the extra mile. We did not tend the garden God entrusted with us because we are more interested in living in Mars in the darkness and cold. A place we once were, a place we destroyed, a place where little creatures like you could never dance and play. We should be ashamed, but many are not. We should care, but many cannot. And we should honor you as an indispensable part of the web of life, in which each living thing works together to honor the life cycle of this garden we were tasked to tend. Many do not understand. Your flesh is too yummy and only worth the stomach acid used to break you down and defecate you away. Our bodies are not temples as long as your blood and the blood of all living creatures run through us. What temple was built on slaughter, blood, pain, and torture? What temple dared to be built this way? Ours. May the grace of God wrap you in clean waters and protect you from man's suffocating nets, that you will know no more, just as we shall know you no more. Shame on us, forever and ever. Amen.
Karina, what you just said was so profound and people would really appreciate it. Now, it sounds like you're a proponent of climate change. Am I right about that?
Climate change, yes, but animal rights activists, specifically animals, is my focus.
That brings up a political point, and I have to point it out to you because this is what's been going on. Peaked or is called Peter, I think it is, an organization which really saves animals and cares a lot about them, have been on television right now talking about what's going on with regard to the way people are putting dogs in laboratories and other animals in laboratories and taking advantage of them and harming them. We have a time where people are lying. I have to use that. They're lying.
Yeah.
And they're using animals to do all these tests for COVID. What a shame that is. If you had a chance, and you're a writer, if you were to write an editorial, what would you say in that editorial?
Well, first of all, we have to end speciesism. The idea that we're in some kind of hierarchy and we're at the top and we have a right to touch or hurt another being that might not be able to speak or communicate as well as us. I am a PETA member, a very strong PETA member. One of my heroes is Ingrid Newkirk. I sent you a picture of her in the middle of us at one of her functions. And I would probably be pretty brutal. I would show pictures, I would show statistics, and I would probably show them that there are options to this. There's no need for animal testing anymore, really. It's a business. And these animals come in, and once anything becomes a business, it's so hard to stop it once people are making money from the animal trade. Really hard once anything becomes an economy.
Yeah. Now let's talk about your photography, because people, when they take pictures, see things that they never saw before. I'm going to tell you a little story, Karina, and that is years ago, I climbed this mountain and I decided to use a camera. I thought it would be just so much fun to just take pictures of the beauty around me. And then all of a sudden I took a picture of a rock, and on that rock was a Nazi swastika.
God.
And I realized that photography can point out things to you that you can't see with your own eye.
Yes.
So what kind of photography do you do?
That's a really very good point. And just what you said reminds me of my last photography project, in which there was a banana plant growing in my backyard. And every day I sat out on that little chair and I took a picture of that banana plant growing. And I got photographs of a banana plant that people have never even seen before. The whole growth, how the bananas came up, how it changed in the color, and the beautiful rain on the leaves and the gorgeous little bubbles of water as they sparkled in the sun. And so I have a whole narrative about this banana plant, just like what you said, how photography sometimes catches the details that our eye misses. And like you, who went back to see the rock, I went back to see, oh my God, this is really a fabulous thing. Who knew all this information about a banana plant was really out there in front of us and sitting in my backyard? I mean, how blessed is that, right?
That's right. And my other question to you is that when you do what you do, I mean, I know this is kind of a repetitive thing, but when you do your photography, you do your writing, and you tell all these stories. In fact, I'd like you to tell our audience a story that you had that you think is very unusual.
A story? You mean a short story?
Yeah.
Oh, well, how we talk about a play? A play I just finished. I had a run with some plays. I had epiphany, play after play. I wrote a play called, its name is Timmy in the Tiny House. And Timmy is a ghost who's been reincarnated so many times, his brain is fried. So he's always jumping around. He's talking about things in garble, jumpy and nervous and And he decides to haunt a hot tiny house. You know the show Tiny Houses, where they're just like 250 square feet and they shove these families in there and they torture them?
Right. Of course.
Right. Well, Timmy decides to haunt a tiny house. There happens to be a guru and his assistant, who's a yoga teacher, and they go all around the country promoting tiny houses because you give away your stuff and they come and they take your stuff and, help you get rid of all your things. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so they find a young couple who goes into this house and is haunted by Timmy. and they lose all their things and decide they can't do it anymore. And the guru ends up with the wife, and the yoga teacher ends up with the husband, and Timmy gets his house back. So it is a comedy, and it is a full-length play, and it will be probably performed or trained to perform, like just the first, when we got to iron it out at a theater in New York.
It's going to be in. It's going to be in a theater in New York.
Yes, it's going to be in a repertory theater because there's probably a lot of stuff I have to iron out. With play work is very hard because you really have to see it and you have to hear the people talking to you to make sure the dialogue's right. And then you have to add. So these plays, the theater that I'm going to probably be at, is the theater where you see all the big plays on Broadway and they're all sleep. This is a theater where you work all that stuff.
Karina, interestingly enough, it sounds like you would be a fabulous actor. I mean, honestly, there's so much about what you do and what you write that you can express through acting. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh my God, I cannot believe you mentioned that. Oh, you want to hear what happened to my brief acting career? And I wrote a story called The Accidental Actress. Here at the Delray Theater, I got a part to play Miss Peak in the play Spider's Web by Agatha Christie. And Miss Peak is a huge part, okay? She's this caustic gardener lady. She has not too many scruples. She was in the art business. Bodies are falling out of closets. She's stuffing them in closets so people won't find them. And so I got this part at the Delray Beach Theater. And I was really into it. And then I got hit with a personal tragedy. My husband did passed away, Peter Pereira. And so I was not able to finish the play. But I would have been, my name would have been up in marquee stars there. So you have a good point there. I'm very grateful that you picked up on that. You're a very sharp person.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's my job. But, here's what I'm thinking. You've written so many things that kind of are geared to kids. And kids today are not going to schools. We're a very lucky state here in Florida where our kids are going to school, but they're not going to school in other places. And the things you've written and the things that you do can be such an inspiration to kids. So what do you think would be the way for you to reach out to these young people so that they know what you write, what you do, and how you have this spirituality kind of persona?
That's a good question. Most of my stuff written for, well, you know what? I think it would be, we would go right back to that book I wrote, Ancient Spells for a Modern World. I bring the kids together and we make spells like Save the Animal spells. We make spells anti-techie tea to get them to put down their devices. We make spells like the Karuma Love Potion, which is a spell that you send to somebody when you want to send them good energy. So I think that by connecting people together, the motto I used, the tagline, let me see for a second, I wanted to create spells that everyone can do because anyone can change the world.
That's wonderful. Karina, I don't know whether you're comfortable with me asking you and you telling the audience about Peter Pereira. I need to kind of have you talk about him because for my audience, they ought to know that Karina's husband, Peter Pereira, was my art teacher, and he was so wonderful. He did so many great things. I have it hanging in my living room right now because it is such a wonderful thing that he left 2 paintings for me. Tell our audience a little bit about Peter.
Well, Peter and I had a creative life together. It was nonstop since the beginning. I met him, and 3 weeks later, I was in a spandex bag with another girl, and we were making anamorphic shapes and dancing to music that he had written, and he was painting live on stage, inspired by us being the muses. Then we had gallery shows all over the world, Montreal, Canada. I did an MA in English literature. We toured the world. We did Broadway musicals, Evolution F. We did The Trees of Life, probably one of the marquee shows. The Trees of Life was interesting. Stop me if I go on a little too long.
No, don't tell everything, because
Okay.
really, my experience with Peter was just absolutely terrific. And
Yeah,
I think people ought to know about your husband.
yeah. He was probably, I think he will be known as one of the greatest artists of our time. He certainly will be known as one of the most prolific. He was
That's
doing
right.
cartoons in Strauss News every week in New York City. In fact, when he passed, they did a whole huge spread in New York, a two-page spread on his passing. We did a show called The Trees of Life, and this was an interesting show because it was mandated on Governor's Island, and it was to leave no carbon footprint, and it was to be interact, so that even if your drunk uncle came to interact, nothing would happen. And we thought, looking at the park, what is the most dissonant thing that you walk by every day and you never see? Well, it's a tree. You could walk by a tree a million times and you're never going to notice what branches it is, what color it is, because the bark prevents you from reaching out and touching it. And tactile experience is such an important difference between humans understanding. And so Peter was able to cue in on that. And so what he did was he wrapped the trees in tight spandex. And he put balls underneath with bright neon colors, and it just popped in the park. And magic started to happen, real magic. Little kids came running up to the trees, hugging them, banging on the balls. People were for the first time touching them tactilely and visually reacting to the color. And because the tactile and the color went together, what happened was the trees they gained character. And whenever an object, inanimate object or an animal gains character, think of Disney, Walt Disney making those little mice characters, we want to preserve it. We want to help it. We want to be part of its reality. And so that's what started happening with trees. People were no longer walking back. After we were there 7 years, people were no longer just walking by them. They were saying, oh, I remember that one from last year. Oh, where's that one? Who chopped that one down? They became very aware. And that brings preservation. And timber is probably something we use.
Yeah. Karina, we're almost at the end of the show, and I always like to give my guests the last word. So what would you tell our audience at this point?
Okay. I would tell the audience one of my favorite quotes that I did come up with, and it is this: when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. And that means when we're in our life and we think everything around us is crashing in, and we don't know which way right or left to turn, and we don't have options and we're confused, it is in that state of chaos in which anything can happen. And so it's a good, healthy place to be, even though it could feel awful.
Well, amazing. You're absolutely an amazing person with your attitude. Your attitude is so positive. Your glass is half full, not half empty. And your spirituality and your care about people is so remarkable. So I want to say, how do people get in touch with you, Karina? Because you could teach them so much.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Well, my email is Holosko, Holsko, with the letter K, Holosko K, @gmail.com.
Well, there you go. Thank you, Karina, for being on the Susan Brender Show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Kiss, kiss, heartfelt.